An audience member of mine said that I am not providing the data to show that live service games, which are shown in Matt Piscatella's weekly top 15 games ranked by active user tracker is showing, is more profitable than the single player games in general. Now, this concern comes from an audience member who said that, I was supposed to test the hypothesis against the available data, but I did not do that. They said I need the sales of the games plus microtransactions of the 43 games in that hypothesis to do that. The 43 games in context is from Linus Tech Tips citing a data set, which you can find on PC Gamer, that about 93% or so of new game spending in 2023 came from 43 games. In fact, his co-host had to reel in pain. That's why I paused it for you guys here. Now, this audience member of mine, I cited Diablo, I cited Elder Scrolls Online, which both games bring in about $10 to $15 million a month. Now, they belong to Microsoft, so again, in an aggregate, that is a lot of money every month in terms of revenue for games that are already established and games that are already released. They said this. Number 2, Diablo was one of the top 10 gross-selling games of 2023. Only 15% was microtransactions, 85% in game sales. That's not downplaying. There's a huge difference between 15 and 85%. What percentage were you expecting for microtransactions compared to the base game? And then they said, I'm not saying microtransactions are relevant, but game sales was still the bigger pool of revenue in that example. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether these games require a price point to come in and then continue spending. It just shows that the gamers are willing to go back and buy the next NBA 2K, the next Call of Duty, the next WWE, the next Mortal Kombat, the next Rocket League. Like, does it make sense? Like, it doesn't really, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because they would choose Call of Duty over your Last of Us game anytime, any day. Does that make sense? And then they will go in and spend more money on those live service games versus your, other single player Ghost of Tsushima, Ghost of Yote. That's why those games aren't selling as much as they are, because these games are occupying, number one, the playtime, as well as the funds of these players, because I can pull the data that you say is not here just by going to Steam's Best of 2023 and looking at the year's top games measured by gross revenue. Now, this is relegated to Steam, so of about 90 or so plus games that were added here, in this list, only about 30-something games were single-player games. So the percentage is staggering that only about 30% of the games that brought in the highest grossing revenue in Steam in the top less than 100 games were single-player games. In 2024, you should see the bloodbath in the highest categories. It's not even funny. You had Power World come out 2024, you had Space Marine, and then you had Counter-Strike, a repeater, in the 2 top categories. This is 24, this is 23. Counter-Strike 2 is there. And guess who else is an appearance there? Dota 2, also from 2023. And you had told me that you played Dota as well, Dota 2. So, again, I told you you're the minority gamer on Dota, because a lot of Dota players will play it differently. You said, given that Diablo 4 was one of the top 10 highest selling games in that year, I'm pretty sure that all of Sony's timed exclusives of that year are in the 43 game list. Well, we don't have a way to verify that because we don't have that data set, but we do have the amount of playtime on PlayStation. So if those PlayStation timed exclusive games could actually hold players' attention, we could actually even give them and correlate and say that perhaps they made it into that data set. But how can you say that you're pretty sure about something? You're heckling me for data, but you're pretty sure about something that we have no data for. That's very strange. I mean, I'm confused a little bit, but again, I'll indulge. You said there are 43 games and you just showed 10 with the highest playtime. I showed 15 on all sides, of which there's a mixture because Delta Force 2024, and this is much newer, this is December 28th, is not showing up on these 2. So add that to the list, the number is actually, more than 15, because some don't appear on all platforms. And in some cases, this particular list is actually about 30 or so. Matt Piscatella just posts the top 15 every week. In fact, somebody asked him about Helldivers 2 one time, and he said Helldivers 2 usually cracks the top 30. That it's a very, very difficult, list to crack for any game. Again, you're heckling me for data, but you just drew a conclusion based on no data at all. You said you're pretty sure that all of Sony's console timed exclusives of that year, like Stellar Blade and Rise of Ronin and Astrobot, will be in that list that I showed. There's no way, because that was a 2023 list. You're taking a 2023 list and drawing a 2024 conclusion out of. Well, that's not possible. I think maybe I said something that you misunderstood. You said, show me the 43 games with their revenue. I mean, I thought you said you knew what games were part of it. Show me that Sony's timed exclusives are not there. I thought you said they were there. Why don't you go bring your data set so that you can show us? Again, ladies and gentlemen, you see one thing about this whole data thing, it's like a double-edged sword. You wield it very carefully because you have to ensure that you have everything that can back you up in that regard. Again, it's not like Matt Piscatella actually only just shows these tracking data. He also shows sales. He also shows all kinds of different metrics and shows what consumer spending look like on the different platforms. So let me just be honest and let me be frank. Live service games, they've come in and they've changed the entire dynamic of the gaming industry. In fact, right now, it is not surprising because all of this is, in my opinion, culminating into PlayStation moving how it invests in its own development cycle, whereby around 2019, it was investing 88% in traditional games and 12% in live service games. But in FY 2025, they're actually trying to flip that ratio to 40% single player, 60% live service games. Why? The data is telling us that this is where the money is. Steam is literally broadcasting the data in everybody's faces, as many of these games are multi-plat. And if a game like Call of Duty has a bigger base on PlayStation, or at least a bigger dedicated base, like the data set that we saw, that about 1 million people on PlayStation as of 2021, 2022 solely spend all their time playing Call of Duty on PlayStation, then single player games are kind of cooked if they don't have a big marketing budget, or if there's just no big, luck that goes with breaking into, helping them break ground into the market. Or even if they break ground, there will always be a handful in comparison to the live service titles. Because you're talking about market saturation. You said, I don't want, to think that I'm downplaying the power of live service revenue. I didn't say you were. I'm saying that you're downplaying what the data is showing us. Because again, like I said, even if people are buying the titles and their live service, they're picking the live service titles because of their frequency, their knowledge, their progress, and all of the things that they enjoy from those games over the single player games. Players like live service games. Gamers like some of the things offered by live service games. You said all companies now want a piece of the pie. That's the reason too many live service games are failing right now. The market is getting oversaturated. There's so many live service games we can play in our time. It's a risky market. Sony lost big on Concord and won big on Helldivers. Why should I believe you that they won big on Helldivers? I don't have to take your word for it. The data tells me that they did. They made it into the platinum list. I already predicted this even way before we got this list. I said this game is going to, don't be shocked if this game makes its way into the top list on PC. We can simply look at that and say, yes. Does it correlate with what Matt Piscatella had been pointing out all this while? Yes, it does. Does Call of Duty, correlate with it? Yes, it does. Does Warframe correlate with this? Yes, it does. So why would you go ahead and try to downplay the data set in terms of playtime when we have the revenue to back it up on the PC side? So you're telling me that the console players are brokies just playing the games and not buying any microtransactions? Then how is PlayStation able to farm microtransaction money that many PlayStation fans have bragged about for a long time? Saying, well, they get 30% of all these microtransactions from Genshin Impact and from Fortnite and from V-Bucks and all that. Yet somewhere, somehow, it's not the best way. What? You even say it here. You said, my point is that this is not Sony's forte, and they seem to think like that, like you, that this is their future. I'm not saying that they're thinking like me. I'm saying that they're just thinking based on the data. I'm not thinking anything. I'm looking at the data. Sony's looking at the data. They're looking at their wallets. They're looking at where all the money is coming from. And all they're getting is 30%. Do you think they don't want 60, 70, 80, 100% of that kind of revenue? They should just stick with what they're good at, single player games that bring people to their platform, and then they can play all the live service they want. Sony will keep making 30% of those sales. They're getting 30% of the COD revenue for free because people play on PlayStation, because that will give you the best single player games. My dude, they are not playing your single player games. You want to force the single player games into the data. Where do you find it? They're not engaging in the single player games as much as they're engaging in the live service games. This is the need for PlayStation to look better than it is, than just the platform that is a multi-plat platform. That's all it is. I mean, I don't know what else to say, man. Like, you can be showing data to a lot of our folks, and even some of our folks that are supposed to be like, sound data, people are still going to find a way to want to make things, appear the way that they want it to appear. It's independent of you and I. I'm not playing these games. You're probably not playing most of these games, but other people are. And every year they make them, they're the biggest game of the year. The two biggest games this year were EA College Football 2025 in terms of sales, and then Call of Duty. Those were the two biggest games. After Cyborg were 1.5 million units sold. Where did all those 61 million consoles put their investment in? They put their investment in other games, not the single player games that PlayStation is making. So again, I cannot take seriously, this whole conversation about, oh yeah, PlayStation this, PlayStation that. PlayStation had a very, very sound proposition in the PS4 days, and a lot of things worked in their favor. But the market had already been evolving into this juggernaut for the live service, thing by 2017, going to the end of their generation. And because they sold big in 2018, you have to realize that is not the norm. That was an outlying, scenario for them to have sold 20 million units of Marvel Spider-Man and bring in $3 billion. But that is not the norm, especially now with more and more of these live service games coming into people's, knowledge and people's psyche. The finals, EA Sports FC continue to bring more. First Descendant showed up. If we look at 2024's list, you should compare 2023 and 2024. Just go and compare both of them and see the bloodbath that actually happened, because the single player games, they were rearing their head in 2023 in the top categories. But by 2024, man, they were getting smoked, pushed down. Like, it was insane. By the number of games that have now come into perspective, if this trend continues, man, I don't know, man. I do not know. The gaming industry is not going to be the same as you think it to be. So again, when Matt Piscatella posts this data set, when he posts other things about spending in terms of individual gamers, in terms of different platforms, I strongly believe that a lot of folk need to pay attention. That's what it is. Pay attention. If you do not pay attention to the overall theme and overall what's going on, it's going to behoove you every single time. Every single time. All right. Talk to me in the comment section. Peace out.